Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the West Goshen Township Board of Supervisors meeting for February the 4th. To start the meeting, will you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. It's great to see everybody here. This is our favorite kind of meeting for the Board of Supervisors. We have a lot of congratulating to do, I think, tonight with the West Goshen Police Department. So first, I just want to let you know that we are live streamed on our YouTube channel, and the meeting may be audio or video recorded by people in the room. With that, I will hand over to Chief Carroll to recognize the promotion of Detective Jose Torres to Detective Sergeant Torres. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. And I want to say first that we appreciate the board's support, their continued support of our department, and for allowing us to perform this promotion here tonight during the meeting. So I want to start by acknowledging a lot of the individual officers retired and current in the audience today from other departments to come out and support our department and support Jose. We really appreciate you being here. I'm not going to try and name you all individually because I'd probably mess it up, but thank you for coming. Now I'd like to call Jose Torres, Jackie Torres, and Jordan Torres to the front, please. Now normally during our promotions we do bring the family up for different parts of the promotion. And we do that for a reason, because none of the officers you see along the wall, none of the officers in the audience or those that have retired ever get to do this job to the level of success that they do without the support of their family at home. This is an integral part of success in our field, and we really want to acknowledge that here tonight and thank them for lending us Jose from time to time. I'd also like to thank Judge Gosh for coming out and performing the ceremony for us. He's very dependable when we call, even sometimes when we call really late. He always shows up and helps us out. I appreciate that. Tonight we will be promoting Jose Torres. Currently he's a detective in our department, but he will be getting promoted to sergeant tonight, and he will be taking over as sergeant of the detective unit. Jose graduated from North Catholic High School in Philadelphia, after which he joined the United States Army, served 4 years, and got out in 1991. He was then hired by the Pennsylvania State Police in 1993, and he served a solid career, retired in 2014 as corporal. And he began his life here at West Goshen in 2014 after retiring. And here he began as a patrolman, but quickly entered, within 2 years, the detective unit, has been in the detective unit ever since, performing an outstanding job. We're happy that he's here. We're happy to promote him to sergeant so he can lead that unit. And without further ado, Judge Gosh, would you please come up?
Thank you. All right, you raise your right hand. And it's nice to see you as well, and meet your family. So on this happy occasion. I did have a story to tell, but it took the words out of my mouth. So. All right, so repeat after me, please. I, Jose R. Torres,
I, Jose R. Torres,
do solemnly swear
that
I will support, obey, and defend
I will support, obey, and defend
the Constitution and laws of the United States,
the Constitution and laws of the United States,
the Constitution and laws of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania,
the Constitution and laws of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania,
and the laws and ordinances of West Goshen Township,
and the laws and ordinances of West Goshen Township,
and that I will discharge my duties with fidelity.
and that I will discharge my duties with fidelity.
I further acknowledge that I will uphold and enforce the law
I further acknowledge that I will uphold and enforce the law
without consideration to a person's
without consideration to a person's
race,
race,
color,
color,
sex,
sex,
condition,
condition,
religious creed,
religious creed,
sexual orientation,
sexual orientation,
age,
age,
national origin,
national origin,
ancestry,
ancestry,
handicap, or disability.
handicap, or disability.
Congratulations, Sergeant.
And of course, if your wife took Jackie so long to do that, I understand you practiced it. Before we move on, I'm going to ask the board to make a comment.
Yeah, I just asked the chief to allow me a minute here just to say to Sergeant Torres, thank you so much for what you've done already for this police department, and more importantly, what you've done for the citizens and residents of West Goshen and the surrounding community. We appreciate everything you've done in your career to date. Congratulations on becoming a sergeant, and we wish you only the best in the years ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now we're going to move on to the awards portion of our ceremony. So I would like to first call Officers Kennett and Grider and Detective Edwards to the front, please. Each of these officers will be receiving an award of merit for their actions. On October 19th, 2024, the West Goshen Police were called to a shooting at the Wawa on East Gate Street. A citizen reported a fight involving an exchange of gunfire between the actors. Among the responding officers were Officer Kennett and Officer Grider, who observed a vehicle leaving the area. Using their excellent skills as police officers, they recognized that this vehicle could be involved. They stopped the vehicle, which contained one of the actors that was actually doing the shooting, were able to arrest him, take him into custody without any incident, and recovered a gun from the vehicle. Subsequent to that, an investigation led by Detective Edwards led to the identity and capture of the other 3 suspects and the other weapon involved in the incident. So we'll acknowledge all 3 of these officers for their work. We would like to recognize and applaud them for work which has been successful resolution of a very violent incident. I'd like to call Officer Graham to the front, please. Tonight, Officer Graham is going to receive the Departmental Service Award. On Sunday, July 7th, we were dispatched to a call of an adult suicidal female with a gun in her residence. She expressed her intent to end her life with that gun. Among the responding officers was Officer Graham. When he got there, initially he was unable to make contact with the woman inside, but then he had the sense to use a friend of hers phone. She picked up. Officer Graham was able to talk her into coming to the door, eventually giving up the gun and surrendering herself, and going to get mental health assistance at the hospital. All this resolution was done, most of it on the phone, but then to his danger, in person at the front door. So we would like to applaud this officer for his work, which brought a peaceful resolution to a situation that could have otherwise been extremely tragic. Before we do this next one, is Paul McEwen here?
Yeah.
Awesome. Paul, can you come up front with Officer Spigarelli and Officer Needham, please?
Yeah.
Tonight, Mr. McEwen will be receiving our Citizen Award, and Officer Spigarelli and Officer Needham will be receiving a letter of commendation. On Friday, September 13th of 2024, initially, Mr. McEwen was in a local convenience store that has a Bitcoin machine in it. Mr. McEwen noticed that a senior citizen was at the Bitcoin machine stuffing cash into the machine while she was on the phone with someone and crying. He recognized that something wasn't right, gave us a call, and also tried to intervene. When Officer Spigarelli and Officer Logan arrived, they were able to quickly determine that the woman was being scammed. She had already put a large amount of money in the machine, and she had a large amount of money in an envelope that she intended to put in the machine. So they were able to not only stop her from continuing to feed the scammer, but they were also able, through their work after that, to get the Bitcoin company to return the money that she had already put in the machine. Ultimately, in that instance, she wasn't robbed, if you will, theft of any money. And it's important to note that although I think the total amount that day was $8,000, most of these incidents start with $8,000, and they don't stop until somebody intervenes or the victim realizes they're being scammed. So although the saving that night was $8,000, I would suggest it was probably a lot more if nobody intervened. So we would like to thank Paul McEwen, Officer Needham, and Officer Spigarelli for their work that day in saving the savings of one of our citizens and really changing the outcome of her life, I think, financially. Mr. Chairman, that concludes our portion of your meeting tonight. I appreciate your allowing us to do that.
Well, again, on behalf of the board, obviously we want to congratulate all the award winners tonight. So thank you so much for what you do for our community, and thanks to you for helping out with that particular lady. It's a great job. So again, thank you everyone. And if you want to take a little time and take some pictures, we're happy to move out of the way while we have a 5-minute recess. So a round of applause for what everybody tonight. Okay, we will reconvene. We're up to agenda item number 5, which is actually public comment this evening. So if anybody in attendance has an issue or a comment for the board or staff that is about something that is not on the agenda, now's the time to raise it. Does anybody have an issue? Charlie?
Charlie Golden, West Goshen. Good evening, board. A few friendly questions as follow-up to section 37A of our code, or chapter 37A of our code. One is, how do we access West Goshen Fire Department records through a right to know? The other is, what is a major event? And the last question is, are we double billing? So first question, how do we access the West Goshen Fire Department records for billing these major event victims insurance companies?
So you're talking about Goshen Fire or Westchester Fire?
Well, I think both. I think the answer is probably similar for both.
Have you asked those fire companies about their records and access to them?
No, this is the first time I brought this question up.
So I don't have an answer from that. Does anyone else?
Westchester Fire Department is an arm of the borough government, so assuming you could go through the borough through a right-to-know process for that. Goshen Fire Company is a private 501, is a private fire company, so they'd be a 501c3, and I don't know if they're subject to the Pennsylvania right-to-know law. I don't believe they are.
So, Mr. Fisher, can we send that right to know to you then?
No.
I don't think we would have the information.
We wouldn't have it. The Westchester Fire Department is an arm of the borough government. They are the overarching agency, so you would file a right-to-know request with them. Goshen Fire Company is a private 501c3. They're not subject to the regulations under the Pennsylvania right-to-know law.
So we send the right to know directly to West Goshen Fire Department?
No, what I'm telling you is there is no West Goshen Fire Department. Goshen Fire Company is a private 501c3. And Westchester Fire Department is an arm of the borough government. You would send it to the borough.
Okay. Consult with my friends and see if they can help me straighten that answer out. I'm not sure. I still understand.
So, I'm sorry, I just don't understand what you're missing. I'm telling you the Westchester Fire Department is an arm of the borough government. You can submit a request to the borough of Westchester. Goshen Fire Company is its own private entity. They're its own nonprofit. They're not subject to the regulations of the Pennsylvania right-to-know law.
Okay. I think I got it that time. Thank you. So what is a major event and who's checking this discretion? Is it based on the amount of material that is used at an event? Do we know?
So we have an ordinance that describes what the expectations relative to billing by the Westchester Fire Company and Goshen Fire. And we expect that they interpret it and use it as appropriate. You were at the meeting last time when it was described what they billed for. I think Westchester Fire said there was one incident in the last 2 years that they consumed about $100,000 worth of materials, specialized materials, and it's spill cleanup and hazardous waste management situation. And so that was their situation. That was their major incident.
And then there was a number of car accidents.
That was with Goshen Fire.
It was Goshen.
Yeah.
Okay, so we went back and we took a look at the meeting minutes, and Steve Crum, I think, mentioned that residents of West Goshen Township, he's a West Goshen Township, stated that billings not done for typical firehouses, but this is reserved for major events. So I don't think car accidents fall into that category.
Well, Mr. Crum was speaking for Westchester Fire, which is a member, and I just described what they billed for. So you should have asked Goshen Fire Company how they're interpreting it.
Okay, thank you, Sean. And does anybody know if we are double billing? Is the PAFRS sending out duplicate invoices to multiple accident victims' insurance companies?
Again, I don't have an answer to that question. You have to ask Goshen Fire.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in attendance with a question to the board? Okay, then we'll move on to agenda item number 6, which is discussion and possible approval of a proposal from Advanced Electronic Security for access control and IP camera equipment. Chris, do you want to introduce this one?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and our facility superintendent, Mike Cackabo, is here to answer any questions the board may have. So before the board this evening is a proposal from Advanced Electronic Security for the installation of access control equipment and IP camera in the West Goshen Police Department. The proposed location is the second floor lab entrance. The proposal also includes updating the existing software license for the township's current security system. The proposal amount is $5,751. Reviewed the 2025 budget, specifically line item 01-409-38-374, and there are available funds to complete this project.
Thanks, Chris. So just so I'm clear, this was not actually a budgeted project within the 2025 budget. This is something that's come up recently that is going to be an addition in terms of a new project, but it is able to be funded within the allocation of funds within that particular line item in the budget, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Does the board have any questions on the proposal?
I have one. Have we dealt with AES in the past?
Yes, they've been here for 15 years in our security systems.
Thank you.
I have a question, Mike. There's 36 cameras in operation now, correct? And part of this proposal here would be to update the software for those
The
cameras?
licensing software and for the NVR, correct, and for the exact division,
Okay.
for DVR.
My question is why this camera now? I mean, there's 36 cameras already in place. Why is it felt that there's a need for a camera here in the library?
The police requested one in the library. They store evidence in there, so they want to know, along with the card access control, who's coming and going in that room, and they want to have it on monitor 24/7.
Okay. So it's a secure area, it's a sensitive area?
Protected area, yes, correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
So is evidence stored in this lab?
I believe so. They do store evidence in there.
Okay. Any other questions from the board?
I'd like to make a motion to approve this.
Okay, so I have a motion from Mr. Howland to approve the expenditure as Mr. Bayshaw described. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Nate. Are there any questions from the board on the motion? Okay, is there any public comments or questions related to the motion? Doug?
Have we gotten any other quotes?
No, we have not.
This is a vendor that we use routinely, right?
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
It's our security company, correct.
The amount is way below the bidding threshold for other quotes, even, I think, even for telephone quotes.
Okay.
Correct.
Any other public comments or questions? Okay, then we'll take a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Is there any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes 4-0. Move on to agenda item number 7. Thank you, Nate, keeping me on track. So this is a discussion and possible approval of a proposal from Keystone Fire and Security for inspection of the fire protection systems in the municipal complex. Chris?
Mr. Chairman, for the board this evening is a proposal from Keystone Fire and Security for inspection of the fire suppression system in buildings A, B, and C in the West Goshen Municipal Complex. The total amount for all 3 locations is $12,651.11. As with the previous proposal, there is availability in the 2025 budget to complete this work. I'll note that Building D wasn't included because that was completed last year.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Does the board have any questions for Chris or Mike?
I did.
Anything?
When would this take place and how long would the work take?
It looks like it's probably going to be over 2 days, probably. So for the hydrostatic testing at each fire department connection, it's at least 2 hours to check for leaks, weaknesses, and failures in the hookup for the fire department to make sure that we can handle when the pump truck hooks up to the connection. So probably I would say 2 days, 2 hours, 3 hours per connection per building.
Any other questions, Mike? Mike, did we just overlook this when we prepared the budget? Because it looks like it's a 5-year requirement,
It was
right?
supposed to be for 2026, what I was
Okay.
told, and it just popped up along for
You just-
2025.
Okay,
But,
thank you.
yeah.
Any other questions from the board?
So this was done this was a 5-year schedule?
5 years, yes, yep.
And so what was the cost and who was the vendor the last time that this was done?
Still Keystone Fire, but they were previously Marco, and Keystone bought them out.
Okay, so it's the same outfit, just a
Same
different
outfit.
name. Do you have any idea what the cost was 5 years ago?
I have to go back and look.
Did you get any other quotes for doing this work?
Not for this, no, they were on CoStars, and it's below the bidding threshold.
I know it is, I know it is. But you didn't check to see if there were any other outfits out there?
No, like I said, we use Keystone here for all our wet sprinkler suppression systems and things like that, so they've always been here, Marco, since I've started.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Is someone on the board willing to make a motion to approve this expenditure with Keystone Fire and Security?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Nate. Is there a second? Thank you, Ashley. Any final comments or questions from the board? Okay, is there any public comments or questions on the motion? Very good, we'll take a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Is there any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes 4-0. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is item number 8, discussion and possible approval of resolution number 9, 2025, granting preliminary/final subdivision approval for a project at 1235 Gale Road, proposing to subdivide 1,276 square feet from parcel 52-3B-78 and combine it with parcel 52-3B-77. And if I can find my, is this Brian? Thank you. Brian, do you want to just describe what's happening here?
Yes, so in front of you tonight is the subdivision. It's titled the Dalco Subdivision, 1235 Gale Road. This is 1235 Gale Road. They also own this parcel at the corner of Gale and Phoenixville. The tax map is incorrect, showing a straight line for the property line. The plan as recorded actually has an existing, the line actually does this.
Like an offset.
Is the line actually zigzags through the property. The property on the right has a residence, the property left is vacant. They're currently proposing to take this triangular piece of land, swap it from the left lot, and give it to the right lot. And it's the same property with the property. They're just shifting the lot line and straightening it out.
Same owner for both properties.
Why are they doing it, Ron? What's the impetus?
Probably to make the lot in better shape because of the way it's shaped. They're bringing this lot into conform. This lot is getting a little bit bigger, this is getting smaller, both same size. Probably for a future project, but nothing to propose.
So the lot that's losing the land, is it still meet the requirements for a residential build on there?
Yep, still meets all the requirements.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board?
Can you go back to that aerial?
So tax map shows it as straight, where currently it does something like that. It zigzags through the property.
Are they just changing the line, or are they subdividing, like?
No, they're just shifting,
Shifting it.
they're taking some property from this lot and giving it to this lot. That's the project. The engineers here know if you have any other questions. It's a very simple.
Mr. Popplewell.
Is there any plans for building to the existing structure that's there now that this would allow to meet the setback requirements?
That's exactly why they're doing it. So the left-hand rear side of this house is where they would have to do an expansion, just the way they have it. The right-hand side has the garage and a mudroom. So logically, they would have to come out the left. So they want to shift the property line over to give them enough room to do an
I
expansion.
figured there had to be a reason.
Beg pardon?
Figured there had to be a reason to go through all this trouble.
Yeah, and they own both parcels.
Yeah. I'll make the motion to,
Just hang on a second. Brian, in your note of December the 19th, I'm not sure it's an error or not, but maybe you can help me out. You have it there. It's on page 4.
Yes. Oh, about the two dates?
It It's actually the second paragraph, comments regarding the legal description for UPI 523B77. Within the first bullet, it says the subject property in the description refers to 523B77, not the subject property of the legal description. Is that accurate, since you're already talking about the legal description for that same parcel?
Yeah.
Looks like it's a cut and paste from above or something that doesn't seem necessary.
The way the beginning paragraph of the description was written, it's the same comment for both.
Okay.
Because they didn't, the way the initial, when you write a legal description, you tell them where
Yeah.
to start, and the way they told it where it started didn't match up to it.
So it applies to both?
Yes.
Okay,
Because
thank
there's a
you.
legal description for both, we use the same way to start the legal description to tell you how to get to the start.
Yeah, and just so I'm 100% clear that what's recorded for tax purposes is inaccurate relative to the deed, right?
Yeah, the recorded plan, the recorded deed shows the line as per the survey.
Yeah,
Chesco view shows it as a certain line.
okay, thanks. John, you want to make the deal? So Mr. Hellman's made a motion to approve the preliminary final subdivision as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Just make it clear that it's based on the motion that's in your packet with all those conditions.
Yeah, so let me just rephrase that. So the motion, just to check, Mr. Hellman, is consistent with what's described for the resolution number 9, 2025, including all the conditions that are described in there for the decision. Thank you. Any final comments from the board? Is there any public comment or questions? Very good, we're ready to take a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Is there any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes 4-0.
Do you want to take this and just a copy of the motion? Nice to see you.
Okay, next is agenda item number 9, which is discussion and possible approval of request for a waiver of land development for Brandywine Regional Airport at 1205 Ward Avenue for the widening of the existing runway. Ryan, see you again.
Yes, so we have Jared Benantuno here tonight from the airport as engineer from Trans Systems to answer any questions. My understanding of the proposed project is to widen both sides of the runway by 5 feet to bring them to current FAA compliance for the minimum width. They have their NPDES permit already granted. If they would go through land development, I don't know what they would accomplish going through land development other than going through stormwater, which they will provide because they have an NPDES permit. They would get a township level permit from me for that. But I think it's very difficult to move the location of the runway or adjust anything about the widening of it because they have to widen it to meet the FAA requirements. And that's why I'm doing the project to make it. Jerry can speak to that if I misspoke.
Would it be a simpler project just to widen one side by 10 feet than 5 feet on both sides?
We can't accomplish that because of where the buildings are on either side. There's not enough clearance. If you remember from past conversation, we have the runway safety area, which goes 125 feet from the center line, and then the runway obstacle-free area, which would be 250 feet. So right now, the way it's laid out, the center of the runway is 250 feet from either buildings, north and south side. So if we were to shift it, we wouldn't be allowed to do that by the FAA. But by widening 5 feet on either side, the runway center line stays the same. And we maintain our 250 feet runway obstacle-free area and our 125 runway safety area.
Thank you for the explanation. Any other questions?
Yeah, could you describe a little bit about what the stormwater mitigation facilities you're going to put in with this proposal?
You take that one?
Sure. We're going to have a detention pond at the end of the runway. We'll have, I think there's 3 infiltration trenches, which mainly slow down the volume and the peak flows before it goes back into the existing stormwater systems. So it's all been designed to account for the additional pavement that we're adding on both sides of the runway.
And none of that exists now?
None of that exists now. And it all has stone within it, so it's going to keep the water below level so we don't have other issues with water levels.
Have you had issues with the funneling on the existing runway? Has there been puddling because of lack of stormwater at this point with the existing runway? Have you had any problems with with water pooling on the runway itself?
No, only one spot on the western taxiway where we had a problem with puddling, but that was a grading issue from a previous contractor, and basically all we did was we put a small like trench, and now it runs down into the basin where it should be. But the basins now have a stone trench in them on the south side of the runway, which work fabulous because we maintain them meticulously, and our pooling of water after a heavy rain event only lasts for about 6 hours and it dissipates. Because again, we can't have pooling water because it attracts waterfowl and they're dangerous to aircraft. So we have to get rid of the water somehow, and the stone trenches we have now work perfect. We are just adding to those, and we're going to add more to again keep the water from pooling or ponding.
Okay, thank you.
Is the design basis for the new basins, etc., is it just for the increase of impervious surface, or is it actually beyond that? Is it going to enhance even more?
It's just for the increase in impervious surface.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, we're looking for a board member who's willing to make a motion to approve the request for a waiver of land development for this project at the Brandywine Regional Airport. Thank you, John. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Nate. Is there any comments or questions from the board on the motion? Okay, is there any public comment or questions about the motion? Doug?
The detention basin is that at the end of the runway?
Hang on a sec, Doug. Tina, can you hear me? Tina, can you hear me? You on mute? Tina, can you hear me?
Tina?
Yes,
Okay, you can hear me, right?
yes, I can hear you perfect.
Okay, we can hear you. We're just on agenda item number 9, and we're about to take a vote. So since you missed the discussion, you may want to abstain from this, but Doug has a question.
It has to do with the detention basin you're going to...
Yes, I can hear you, no problem.
Okay, is that going to attract birds at all? Is it going to be near the center line of the runway?
No, it'll actually be at the west end of the runway.
Off to the side?
It's going to be out towards 202.
Off to the end. It's because right now our runway is elevated at the end approximately 30 feet. So at the bottom of the hill in the runway, there'll be a detention basin. Currently, there's a swale that goes into a head wall, but we're going to leave the swale there, but we are going to add the basin, but in the bottom of the basin, there'll be stone. And the basin, the total depth of the center of the basin is only 4 feet. So we're not talking it's going to be very deep. It's going to be as deep as the swale is now, but then we will berm up around the edge of it. I think it's approximately a foot and a half berm to basically keep the water into the basin to soak in through the stone bed at the bottom.
The stones further promotes that infiltration to keep it from the surface level when it travels.
So it'll be far enough away from the runway so any attraction of birds won't...
Correct, exactly. Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Are there any other questions? Okay, then we're ready to take a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Is there any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes 4-0. Okay, Tina, we're now moving on to agenda item number 10. So hopefully if you can hear everything, that'd be great. If you cannot hear, please let me know.
Okay, I can hear the board, that's about it.
Okay. Okay, agenda item number 10 is a discussion regarding a proposed amendment to the West Goshen Township zoning ordinance pertaining to historic resource protection. And Ms. Campos, Lissa will introduce this one.
Sure, so this was something that's been in the works for quite a while. It's coming and gone. But your Historic Commission recently resurrected this, and it would be an amendment to your zoning ordinance. There are definitions relating to historic resources, and it would identify an inventory of historic resources that's based on a 2013 Historic Resource Atlas. So it would define historic resources as being either Class 1 or Class 2. Class 1 are resources that are listed on the National Register or determined to be eligible to be on the National Register. And then the Class 2 historic resources are ones that have already been designated on this 2013 Atlas. You would be adopting this inventory. You would have a procedure in place that before somebody could demolish a historic resource, they'd have to go through a review process by the Historical Commission. The Historical Commission would be a recommending body to the Board of Supervisors, and the Board of Supervisors would ultimately have to approve a permit to demolish a historic resource. So that's the main protections that are in place here. There is also a provision that would prohibit demolition by neglect. So basically, if somebody owned a historic resource and just wasn't properly maintaining it and properly caring for it, that would be considered demolition by neglect. That is a defined term, and the township would be able to issue notices of violation under the zoning ordinance. So happy to answer any questions. Somebody from the Historical Commission, I think, is here to, again, also answer questions. This was something, I think, gosh, even before the pandemic, I think it was something that we looked at and talked about, and it never really got carried on. So now they're proposing this to be a separate article in your zoning ordinance.
Thank you, Kristen. Would you like to introduce yourself and say a few words?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. I'm Stephen Lyons, Secretary for the West Goshen Historic Commission and Chairman of the Subcommittee on the Historic Ordinance process. We did submit a letter with a caveat. I believe it was dated January 24th, 2025. We accept the document with the addition of 3 words, quote, addition of documentation by drive-by of exterior views and documentation of the interior, if accessible, and a current historic atlas register, end quote. And we defer to the discretion of Ms. Camp on the placement of this, and just wanted to address any questions as far as that goes.
I didn't know where that went. I have no idea what you're trying to accomplish by putting that in there, and I really did try. So please tell me what you're trying to get at there.
Yeah, because it does seem to parallel under general provisions, which is...
Is it 135A where you want...
It seems to be, yes.
So who's doing the documentation by drive-by of exterior views? Who is it that you want to do that documentation? The property owner or the Historical Commission?
The Historic Commission.
Okay.
And also the attached Historic Atlas Register is actually not current. And that just needs, we do have an online database which includes several databases of our historic assets, because it's been a complicated process merging from the hard copy atlas downstairs to a digital spreadsheet. So we do have that documented online, but a current historic atlas does need to be amended.
And that's actually the most important component of this, I believe, to identify which properties actually are designated as historic resources and to make sure that the board understands those properties and makes a determination that, yes, those should be on that list, because it affects people's property rights. So I want to make sure that they are aware, or at least have a recommendation from the Historical Commission that somebody has taken a look at that list. A long time has gone by since 2013, things have happened. So I would want to make sure that somebody's looked at that list, certified that yes, what's on there is accurate as far as being worthy of protection, and then the board makes that legislative decision that yes, that should be the inventory that is going to be applied, that this ordinance is going to apply to. So this ordinance, because it's an amendment to the zoning, the municipality's planning code has very specific rules for how a zoning amendment gets adopted, and one of the first steps is that we have to send it to the County Planning Commission. We can't send it until that list is attached. So is that something you guys are working on?
Yeah, I mean, we could submit that within the week if
yeah, I mean, if the board's, I think the board would probably want to look at that list before, it gets sent. But the next step is for this to be sent to the county planning, the final version that everybody's satisfied with, your planning commission to review it. And then if, depending on those comments, sometimes the board wants changes to be made, sometimes they don't, then they schedule a public hearing to adopt it.
So just so I'm clear about this list. So the list is a list of existing properties that have already been classified either Class 1 or Class 2 historic resource. So at some point somebody made that determination about West Goshen, and these are the ones that have been identified that meet some criteria. Is that true or not? I mean, this list seems to have been around for a long time.
Yes, it has been, but there are a few errors and omissions.
So I don't feel myself as a board member that I don't have any expertise in understanding how these properties reach some level of classification. Has the Historic Commission already been through and done that hard work, if you like, of looking at this list yet? You said that some that don't seem to be correct. Is that true?
Correct. The list, the hard copy list downstairs is merging, is working its way towards a digital, record. For example, there's a few properties that should be Class 1 that are Class 2, and we have we have three different spreadsheets that just need to be reconciled and submit for an accurate representation. And we can supply you with a definition of Class 1, 2, and 3.
And the listed property owners is presumably not current either, correct? Is this?
Well, we tend to omit property owners out of respect for privacy.
They are on this list that I have, and I have a list now that does have them. I mean, I don't, it's up to you whether you want, sometimes I think it's helpful because you might know them.
Isn't that public information?
Yeah, I mean, we can look at it in Chesapeake View. So I can go through this tomorrow and update based on records as of tomorrow, and provide that to you if you want.
And what has the Historic Commission done in terms of any reach out to the property owners, either recently or years ago in the past, since this has been in works for quite some time, to advise them or inform them about this kind of classification of their property and the potential for this ordinance? Has any reach out been done at this point?
Not at this point. There was a misunderstanding in the past in terms of our role as a historic commission, but that is certainly something we can consider in terms of reaching out to.
I wasn't asking if you've done, I was just trying to understand the situation, to what level of dissemination of this and where we are in terms of this list has occurred to date. And you're saying to this point, the individuals or property owners have not been notified, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Does anyone else have questions?
Yeah, I just want to get a better handle on that. The procedure for creating these three lists that you mentioned need to be reconciled. I mean, what was the vetting procedure done to determine whether a property should be Class 1, Class 2, or Class 3, or even be on the list at all? Can you shed any light on that at all, Steve?
So Class 3 is under 50 years or earlier. Class 2 is older, and Class 1, do we know what Class 1 is?
It's defined in the ordinance as being on the National Register or determined to be eligible on the National Register. So there's actually, I mean, there's language in the ordinance that identifies whether something can be Class 2. So presumably somebody, when creating that list, had gone through that criteria to determine that those properties that are identified as Class 2 meet some of those criteria. So for example, one has significant character, interest, or value as part of the development, heritage, or cultural characteristics of the township, Chester County, the Commonwealth, or the nation, is associated with the life of a person or history of an organization of importance to the history of the township, the county, the Commonwealth, or the nation, is associated with an event of importance to the history of the township, the county, the Commonwealth, or the nation, embodies distinguishing characteristics of an architectural style, vernacular type, or feat of engineering, is the noteworthy work of a designer, architect, landscape architect, designer, or engineer whose work has significantly influenced historical, architectural, economical, social, or cultural development of the township, county, region, commonwealth, or nation. Contains elements of design, detail, materials, or craftsmanship which represent a significant innovation, and there's a couple other ones. So those are the criteria. If a resource meets 3 or more of them, it is then determined to be eligible to be a Class 2 historic resource.
So somebody has made that assessment, correct? Somebody.
I don't know where the current list came from. So I think, my guess is that there was a comprehensive plan at some point. Usually these lists come out of a comprehensive plan, and then a prior comprehensive plan identified historic resources. That's typically a process that happens through comprehensive planning. And then typically a comprehensive plan will say, okay, now that you have this list, create an ordinance that helps protect and preserve these. So that's my guess. I don't know that for sure.
Thank you.
Since we're on that section, I had a comment regarding that section, if I could add it.
Go ahead, Tina.
In section D, I thought that we should add an age factor in there. Say something that was built in the 1700s or earlier, whichever applies, something like that, just an age factor of the actual building itself.
Yeah, the only thing about that, Tina, is that this ordinance, I mean, that age changes as if this ordinance is in place, 20 years from now. It's hard to do that, I think. A lot of times, a lot of ordinances say if it's 50 years or older. Well, people are saying, well, a house built in the 1970s isn't necessarily worthy of protection. So it's hard to determine what that date to put in is.
Okay, and then the second thing I had, maybe it's in there, but I didn't see it. We need to include a clause or a section if it's been named historic by definition here in the document, but we can't locate the owner and or its abandoned property.
I'm not following what you're saying.
If the definition is historic, based on the definition in the document, it's a historic building, and say that it's abandoned, like nobody claims the property and you can't find the owner. What happens to the building at that point? Or can we do anything? Or is there any...
Well, there aren't any situations where we don't know the owner of a property. I mean, every property is identified through the past deed. So there's not a property where we don't know the title owner. Now, whether the title owner is deceased, but there wouldn't be a situation where we have a property where we don't know who the owner is.
I mean, where you can't find the owner. You may know who the owner is, but you can't locate the owner.
Well, I mean, that happens in all of our codes, right? I mean, if we have a provision that we are imposing duties upon an owner and we can't find the owner, then sometimes you get stuck in the enforcement world. You can't do anything about it. You can cite the heirs of the owner, but that does happen. But that happens today under building codes, property maintenance codes, all kind of codes. And it's rare and far and few between.
So we don't particularly need any language in the ordinance?
No. Nope. We'll use Shelby's investigative skills to find the owners, as we're doing right now for a couple properties.
Other questions for Steve or about the ordinance?
Yeah, I have a question. I see in section E here, there's a procedure for addition and removal. Can you describe a little bit? Let's say apparently the owner of the resource could put it on there for consideration. The historical commission could do it. The board of supervisors could do it, or if it's designated by like the National Registry or something like that, that would also qualify them to get on the list. But suppose the owner doesn't want to be on this list. How do they go about appealing a decision by any one of those entities that they would be included? Could you describe a little bit about how that could be done?
About whether or not a property owner would want to be excluded from the list?
Exactly.
We would engage in a conversation with the property owner. I mean, by nature, the classification of the atlas is just that. It's just helps us to understand the historic importance of the house. If it helps to provide a framework for care of these historic assets. So he does have a certain responsibility to see to reasonable care of a historic asset.
Joan, I can jump into a little bit. So page 5 identifies a process. So the Historical Commission has to have a public meeting. They have to provide notice to the property owner that their property is being considered to be added as a resource, as a historic resource. The property owner has an opportunity to come and state their case as to why they don't believe that their property should be added to the inventory or should be classified as a historic resource. The Historical Commission will ultimately make a recommendation, and then it comes to you. Again, it has to be a public meeting process. It specifically says that the board has to consider the oral testimony provided by the owner. So it's going to be at your discretion on whether they meet the criteria that are set forth in this code. And if they disagree with your determination, say you vote to say, yes, we want it to be added as a Class 2 historic resource, they have the right to appeal that to the Court of Common Pleas because that's a determination by a local agency. So there would be an appellate review process they could go through.
But that's what I'm established.
Yes.
There is an appeal process.
Yes.
Within the ordinance.
It's not within the ordinance, it's within the law.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question?
Yeah.
So I noticed in the ordinance, and I should have brought this up when we met back in November, that it defines Class 1 and Class 2, but in the Atlas we have 1, 2, and 3, and I think you mentioned Class 1, 2, and 3. Is there a reason why 3 isn't included?
That by nature it's earlier than 50 years. So the understanding is that 1, 2 are more historically significant. That's how we view the Atlas. Do I have that right?
I would recommend that the Historic Commission relook at that and maybe reconsider that, because I think there might be some properties that you may want to look at again on the Atlas and how they're classified.
You mean 1 or 2?
As
3.
Under 3.
Maybe
if you want to include 3 in the ordinance, or potentially consider through this process reclassifying them, I would recommend that.
Other questions for Steve? This is a discussion at this point, so we're looking for any public comment or questions while we have this conversation going. Steve?
Yeah, just a hypothetical here. There was an old farmhouse at Farm Hill, Phoenixville Pike. We moved in here years ago, but it had been a farmhouse out in the center of that open property. So over the years, the owner just didn't pay any attention to it, eventually collapsed and is gone now. Number one, this property is, or the house is several hundred yards off of the road. Okay, you can't trespass to go in and see what that house is looking like, right? And if the roof collapses, who's going to pay to have it fixed? Okay, you're going to tell the owner that they're going to have to come back in and have it fixed. I mean, I sense what you're trying to do here, but I'm not sure that it really. If I were a property owner, I wouldn't want it. Okay, particularly, if you have an historic house and you're marketing it as that, then that's the way it should be. But I don't think you really can step in and say, your house is historic, it's a number 2 or it's a number 1, and you can't do anything with it. If we see you doing anything with it, we're going to come.
And fine.
Fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. I personally, I have a hard time.
Steve, just to be clear, you're opposed to the ordinance as a concept, really? Yes. You're opposed to this general approach of trying to preserve.
I know we need historic properties, we need some for protection, so that we don't lose them, but I don't think we can.
So do you have a solution then? Because that's what this is intended to do.
So the West Goshen Historic Commission is an advisory body. Our job is just to advise our neighbors, our partners in government, that these historic assets represent tremendous importance and cultural value, and actually increase the property values of our entire community. And so it's the historic ordinance, and especially the demolition by neglect clause, is an instrument to help us facilitate a conversation, and hopefully a positive conversation, about maintenance of these historic assets, because generally people who buy historic homes generally know that they are buying a historic home and that they have certain responsibilities to maintain that home. Now, what we're seeing in our township
personally, there's some properties that are owned by developers, and they're just sitting on these assets, and they hold tremendous cultural importance to our community. And I think personally that's egregious. So it's more like a framework so we can have a conversation. We don't want to put anybody off, or it's, you have to do this, you have to do that. But, you know, if there's a beautiful historic asset, we want to prevent the destruction of some of these places. And, you know, certain things like, you know, strongly encouraging a property owner to put a tarp on their roof to prevent the roof from deteriorating.
But the other hand, I mean, I see situations like at 926 and 202. There's a Serpentine house that's been there, I grew up in that area.
The West Town Inn, right?
No, it's across the street from, well, it used to be Bartram's Market there. It's across the street.
From the owner's market.
Yeah.
From the
Darlington's Corner.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that house has been next to that road for decades, and they keep expanding the road. And eventually, I think that there's going to have to be something that's going to have to happen. I don't know if the township owns it now, the Craig Farms, that whole thing. But, you know, if you tell the state or a developer, and the state may take this over, because I need to expand the intersection, that you can't do anything because of the situation of it being a historic property, then, you know, I think there are going to be some conflicts here. And I think it's going to be hard to...
Well, can I ask a question just to follow up from that? I'm looking through the ordinance, or maybe I missed it, maybe give me clarification. Is there anything in this ordinance that we require an owner of a historical property to maintain it to a certain degree? It's really just addressing the demolition of such a property. Is that not true?
It's mostly focusing on demolition.
So in your situation, Steve, it wouldn't require a homeowner to maintain it at a certain level that would be determined by somebody else.
Right, if the farmhouse just kind of keeps, you know, hits the roof, it leaks, everything starts to rot, it collapses, and eventually, you know...
It's demolition by neglect.
It's demolition, yeah.
That is addressed.
That is addressed.
But is D under 136, is that what what's required to upkeep if you own the home? 1 through 8, page 9.
Yeah, you want to make sure those don't happen. If any of those situations happen, that constitutes demolition by neglect. But the goal, Steve, is to make sure that somebody understands that it is a historically significant property and that don't let it get to the state where now they come in and say, I have to demolish it, it's too expensive to fix it. Where the historical commission and the board could have said, hey, wait, hold on, you know, help. This is a really important property. Like, can you fix the roof? Can you make sure, can you just, and it's not saying, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. It's just making sure that the minimum measures are taken to put a tarp on the roof or put a boarding on the, you know, so that at some point it's, if they no longer are the owner and somebody else that wants to preserve it and rehabilitate it, whatever, but to just let it be deteriorated by neglect. And this is all a policy decision. This is absolutely something the board has the power to do based on the municipality's planning code. It doesn't come without debate and both sides, you know what I mean? It's something they have to think about.
And in some situations, there may not just be, you know, separate from this, there may also be violations related to the property maintenance code or to the building code or things of that nature. So there may be other things that would be enforceable in a situation like what you're describing outside of the ordinance that's before the board this evening.
I just want to also, you made a comment that somebody's going to know that they're buying a historic home. I mean, is that true?
Well, on the seller's disclosure form for residential property, you are required to disclose if you as the owner know that your property is historic. So to the extent that this gets adopted and you have some notification to these owners, they now have notice and knowledge that their property is identified as a historic resource. And so under the law, they are required to disclose in their seller's disclosure that yes, that property is historic. Does that always happen? No, but the buyer then has recourse against the seller if they knowingly fail to disclose that. But that's something that the Historical Commission often does. They're very proactive in having communication with the owners of these properties because they want them to understand how significant the township believes these properties are.
So if you buy a property and you don't have that notice, let's say you buy a property and it's not classified as historic, and then suddenly, I don't know what would happen on here where you discover the property and you say, you know what, that actually falls under class 2. 2, a class 1, and now you're responsible.
No, you would have to get notice. So if you bought that property and it was not classified as class 1 or class 2, well, number one, it can't be class 1 without you being involved in that, really. But as a class 2, that property owner has to, so say for example, I bought a property, wasn't on the list, Historical Commission went through and decided one of these class 3s was something, no, we should preserve this. This has the procedure that they have to notify me. I'm given the opportunity to come to that meeting where they're voting to put it onto the list.
And if you say, I don't want it.
Well, then it becomes, they don't always have to listen to what I want to say. It's ultimately the Board of Supervisors' decision as to whether a resource gets added to the list.
Right, and I think what Steve is kind of talking about is that that's their last recourse, like that's their lost opportunity to come to us and say, I don't want to be on this list. Like you're telling me now that my property needs to be under this class 2 thing, and like, I've never had notice, I didn't buy the property in that condition, and now you're telling me that I have to do like this upkeep. I'm just saying, there is like some validity to somebody not having that knowledge when they buy a property, and then having it added, and then being responsible for doing things that they never, like if I know someone came to me, you know, I don't have a historic house, but if, you know, it's pretty old, it's built in 1930, maybe one day it does become historic, and they come to me now and they say, okay, well, we're putting you on this list, and we don't care if you don't want to be on it. Now you have to, you know, do all these things. And like, I upkeep my house, but like, are you now telling me that I have to put a new kind of roof on? Like,
No, they're not telling you anything about how they have to make sure, all they're going to say, first of all, you will be given an opportunity to contest that your property should be designated historic, right? So, and that's going to obviously have some weight. Secondly, if they ignored you and said, no, we really still think your property's worth being a historic resource, and the board votes for that and adds you to the inventory, it's not telling you what you have to do, it's telling you what you can't do. You can't let it demolish by neglect. You can't just ignore it, walk away from it, fail to keep it in a structurally sound condition.
Actually, what you're talking about is it's an historic architecture review board. They tell you what color your window has to be.
That's not this.
That's not this.
If you look at the general provisions here, it's specific to demolition and demolition by neglect. So in the case of where somebody acquires a property, it's got a small historic building on it, but the lot itself can build a new mega mansion on it, and somebody says, that's what I want to do. If it's not protected by this particular type of ordinance, they could do it.
Yeah.
So this is only about the destruction and removal of a historic resource. It's not about the maintenance of it to a certain standard, to Brian's point.
Yeah, and you also do have a right to appeal. You can take to the Court of Common Pleas if need be, if you didn't like the fact that the Board of Supervisors put you on a list.
And to be honest, the criteria for something to be demolished by neglect is also going to be a violation of your property maintenance code. So there are going to be other things that you're violating by not keeping your dwelling structurally sound and safe to be habitable. It's a pretty high standard. I mean, it's not just like, oh, my roof is getting old, or, you know, my shutters are falling down. I mean, it's somewhat of a high standard.
Chris, are you aware of other municipalities in the area that have an ordinance like this and the kind of issues that have come up over the years in its adoption and use?
Yeah, there's a lot in Chester County. West Whiteland, East Pikeland, Easttown Township has one. I represented the planning commission there. And it really, the situation there was that I remember it being contentious, was a Bentley development, and it ended up that the historical commission and the board voted to deny the demo permit for a historically significant barn. And at the end of the day, it worked in a negotiation, and they ended up putting the barn into somebody's lot. So it served its purpose. It cost time and money and expense, but at the end of the day, they preserved it. I know West Whiteland has one. I know, like I said, East Pikeland, Schuylkill Township, Charlestown Township, Cowan Township is considering one now. Birmingham, I think I shared with you their ordinance. They have one. They recently revised it because theirs, when they originally adopted it, went a lot further than this does and dealt with if you have a historic resource to do any alteration at all, you had to have approval from the board. And the board felt that that was too much. It was very onerous for the board to keep track of all that. So they have since scaled it back, and their now focuses on demolition as well. So I think Chester County is a county that you'll see a lot of these ordinances.
And those ordinances typically just are the same the same
Classification,
provisions
yes,
and
yes.
stuff as
Very
this.
similar.
Exactly.
Very similar.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go back to folks in attendance. Charlie, you had your hand up.
So you mentioned, I think, updating the list, so have all the property owners who may see changes in their designation been notified at this point?
They haven't updated the list yet. They're working on that. So that'll be a board decision. Once they get that final list, the board will determine what notification they want to provide to those owners. That hasn't been determined yet.
So Charlie, I asked this earlier, that no communications happened so far in this journey that this ordinance has been on for several years to any of the property owners on this list.
Okay, so shouldn't we just table this until those owners are notified?
No. Because we have resources in the county right now that are falling into a disastrous state. And the more that we delay, the more that it creates a problem for both property owners and the township, in my view.
Okay, so forgive me for not knowing, but what about the barn on Ellis Lane? Is that historic and is that coming down?
Is that the one that's being preserved through
The home is being preserved, but the barn,
The barn they were originally going to remove, but I believe they're looking to preserve it as part of an amended application, but I would have to speak with you.
Yeah, we have not seen the amended application here yet. I think that was the last one.
Yeah, we have not seen an amended application, and to the best of my knowledge.
Is that home on the list or the barn? Is it on this particular
It's on here, I see it on here, it's a class 1 resource, it's number 8, the class 1 or class 2, let me just see real quick.
So for example, if we didn't have this ordinance and this list all approved and done, the developer for that particular property could just demolish that home, no questions asked, and build whatever the zoning allows there. So it would not have been preserved at all. So with this in place, they wouldn't be allowed to do that until dialogue.
I think my understanding is because that was a historic tavern or inn, the house stays, but I see a lot of remorse on the websites about taking the barn itself down, so that's kind of like in play, isn't it?
Well, it was in their original application for development, but I'm hearing it hasn't progressed. They're re-looking at it. So.
Brian, they haven't submitted a land development application, they've just gone through the zoning process.
The zoning application submitted contemplates removing the barn and reusing it.
Yeah.
And saving the house is the current application that was brought through for zoning.
Yeah.
But there may be some discussion about an amendment to that.
We haven't seen anything.
Yes, Barbara.
I heard you talk about this applies to barns and houses. Does this apply to other outstructures, outbuildings? Does this apply to fences? Does this apply to, what does this apply to that you would have to maintain that you might consider historical? An outhouse, a chicken coop, how broad is this?
I believe it does make exception. That's a great question.
Yeah, the one thing I would say is that this list, because that was something that was a problem with Birmingham, if there was like a spring house, the house and the barn, this list has to identify specifically which structures on the property are considered historic.
So historic expenses that we...
Well, we don't, so the list is key. That's what I'm saying. So I can't answer your question because this list should say, like, for example, one says it's on Goshen, well, it doesn't say anything. Okay, Judge Gavin's house, that's on this list. Well, he doesn't own it anymore, I don't believe. So then I know he sold this. So it should say dwelling, at that address, which is 415 Goshen Road. But it should say single-family dwelling. Now say there was a barn there. Single-family dwelling and accessory barn. So this list should be clear on specifically on that parcel, because this gives an address and a tax parcel number and a property owner name. But my recommendation is that you identify what specifically on the property is historic. What do you want to be the historic resource? Because, for example, in Birmingham, there's a cemetery, right? So the cemetery itself, the cemetery property is considered a historic resource.
Maybe there's a rock.
So it's important to have specific, right?
Wait, Birmingham Cemetery is classified as a historic?
Under the Birmingham Township zoning ordinance, yeah. Yeah. So that's a very good point. Thank you for raising that. Because this list just has property owner's name, address, and parcel, but doesn't say if there's multiple, like the Ellis Lane was a great example. is the barn also considered a resource? We need to make sure we nail that down. To me, the most important thing is the list and being properly identifying exactly what it is that's considered the historic resource.
Thank you.
So other questions? Yes, sir.
Do we know what the youngest property is on that list?
Youngest being the oldest, you mean?
No, most recent.
No, but there's an atlas downstairs, and you walk in, and I think that has a lot more information about them. So I don't know if you want to make this list available that they can.
That list,
Yeah.
it's attached to the ordinance,
Okay.
it's on the agenda packet. Your name, sir?
Eric Timber.
It's 1920.
address, there are dates on here, I'm sorry.
The most recent is 1920.
Yeah, 1920, what, 402 Rosedale?
So where there's, so if you go on the materials for tonight's meeting and you look for this agenda item, on the right-hand side where there are years available, the Historic Commission has outlined the years.
You
I
can
see.
also take my
Yeah,
copy.
my concern would be, like in Delaware County, there's many homes that are built in the 1920s. And as development, came out towards this way, well, we'll get there sooner or later. And if someone famous lived in the house, 2 or 3 owners before, the current owner might not even have not even able to dispose that.
You wouldn't have to disclose unless you're actually on this list. And I don't want anyone to think that this is something that's going to drastically change and you're going to get, every week you're going to have new property. I mean, this is pretty much a limited list, and the majority of these properties are pretty old. So it's not, I don't see it as like, oh gosh, every week we're going to be looking at another property to be adding. I think it's very few and far between the properties that would apply.
Anyone else with a question? Yes, sir.
Yeah, Ed Mayer, 3 Yorktown Avenue. The list, have you actually, with this list, so you have X amount of parcels, but have you actually physically, I guess it's hard to go physically to the parcel to make sure that the assets are there still. Like, you might say it on the list, but the building may have fallen down 20 years ago, right? So is there any kind of checks and balances to make sure how accurate that list is?
We have a pretty good understanding now of what exists in the township, but working symbiotically with zoning to make sure that we're keeping an eye on certain resources, that just to be aware of what those resources are and if they need a little help.
Any other questions? So in terms of the process here, Kristen, Chris, Steve, I mean, we've had a discussion tonight. I mean, Charlie made a point about we need to bring into the loop at some point the property owners that will be on a list, and we obviously need to spend some time getting this list in better shape than it is today in terms of Kristen's point about describing specifically what it is that is the historic resource for each property and making sure we have the current owners and all the rest of it. So what is the process? What is the next series of steps that happen and bringing those folks into the loop? Because we would have to have a conversation with them. I'm sure it'll be a similar conversation we just had, explaining exactly what this is all about, so they understand and appreciate, hopefully, that we're not trying to tell them how to maintain their windows, kind of, right?
Well, the one thing I heard from Mr. Lyons is that they're still trying to reconcile the lists, and as Kristen said, the list is the most important key. So I think the completion of whatever the resource list is should be done before this goes any further.
And I think the board can discuss amongst itself what notifications and what public rollout you want. So that's up to you. Based on the law, what you're required to do is once you're satisfied with the ordinance, you have to send it to the county planning commission and your planning commission, and then hold a public hearing. If you want to go beyond that, which it's up to you whether you do, you could notify all these property owners that this ordinance is going to be discussed. It doesn't have to be at the actual public hearing. It can just be an agenda item like it is this evening, and you invite them to listen to what the ordinance does, ask questions. And
so let's ask that question to the board now, because it's a key one for me at least. I mean, when we start these processes, if we just move it ahead to the county planning commission, our own planning commission, by the time some folks get wind of it or get notified that there's going to be the hearing on it. It's like, what, this process has been going on here, just notify me now. So I don't feel that that's the right process. So I feel that once you get to the point of having got this list in the shape that it needs to be, that we should then have, this is just my view, we should then notify the property owners and have a public discussion with them around what this means and what we're intending to do with it, and do they support it or not, and see what kind of questions and issues that they have. That's my view. I don't know what other board members think.
Yeah, I think that would be the democratic way to do it.
Well, what do you mean have a public discussion?
Yeah.
Well, it could be a board item, you know, one of the.
Yeah, we can just bring it back here, right?
Yeah.
And after we've notified them of the property owners. Yes, sir.
Can I bring up a point? The township has already informed everyone on that list.
Well, I asked that question earlier, and the answer was we don't think we have, because...
Yes, you have.
No,
They
not to
were all
these
invited.
changes though.
Pardon?
Not to these changes.
Not to the changes.
And that's
But
what we're
everybody
talking
on the list knows they're on the list. And
Can
the
I ask
township
how
made them
they-
aware of that.
How do they know that?
The township sent them a letter.
Okay.
This was years and years ago though, right?
Not years and years, but several years.
Yeah, at least before the pandemic.
Before the
Yeah,
pandemic.
before the pandemic. That was,
And they were all invited to a meeting.
And did they attend?
They did.
And did they support it?
It depends.
So, but I still think informing people is the right thing. And to Mr. Camp's point earlier, the property owners, I see several on here myself, I know they don't own those properties anymore. And to the idea that you were told that this is being discussed would never have happened at the time of sale. So there's a whole bunch of people who probably own these properties today that didn't own them 3, 4, 5 years ago, pre-pandemic. So I hear your point, but I still stand by my opinion that it would be good to notify the current owners and have them attend a discussion. When we fully understand the kind of issues they're going to bring and the different viewpoints that they'll have, the board can decide and weigh their thoughts appropriately. Any other questions or comments? Yes, ma'am. Would you mind stating your name for the record?
My name is Irene Benjamin, and I live in West Goshen Township. I'm also a member of the Historical Commission. As I'm sitting here listening and hearing all the comments, maybe it would be very helpful when it comes time for the property owners to be here, to have maybe a PowerPoint discussion that shows them the process, explains it, and this way they can understand better, and it makes it easier for them to understand, and it's not as onerous that they're going to have to do this, they're going to have to do that. It's more of a consideration for the history of this township and our county that everybody can agree and understand. And this way it won't be as confusing. They'll be educated before there's a whole discussion and it's going to be this ordinance that says this or that. And it's a visual. Many of those I do happen to know from having grown up here. Many of the homes in this area are on that list. I grew up in one. It has a very special spot in my heart on Fernhill Road. And I am very thankful that that property is still being very well cared for. At the same point, there are others where the roof is coming down. There are other means to help people through the Historical Commission and grants and different things, Planning Commission, Chester County, etc., where funds may be available for them to be able to repair, restore, preserve to the best of their ability. All that is part of an education process in order to accomplish something. So that's my suggestion when it comes to a public meeting for the owners and others in the township. We, maybe as the Historical Commission, working with the board, present a PowerPoint as an education process.
Thank you. That's a good idea.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Other thoughts or comments on the process or the next steps? Okay, so what I'm hearing, if I hopefully can summarize this right, is we want you to continue to progress the completion of the list in particular and to get it to a degree of accuracy in terms of the description of what is considered the historic resource at the property and also the current property owners. And Kristen, do we need your specific help with any of this? Or?
No, we have a runner, 2 awesome college boys that love projects like this, and I don't charge for their time, so I actually wrote it down, I'm going to have them update the list tomorrow and email that to you, so they're super interested in the law and they'd like to help.
So with that, we could probably be able to have an agenda item in another month or so to make sure we've given ourselves time to notify the property owners, and then we'll have that session where it's an education session to Ms. Benjamin's point, and carry on the conversation then.
I volunteer, and hopefully others will help, to, work on the PowerPoint for that process. And I just think it would really be very beneficial.
Since you brought it up, we were going to...
I'm used to giving presentations in order that clients will buy something, so.
I think the key for me, just to opine here, is when I saw this several years ago, it did have all this stuff about maintenance and all the rest of it, and it was prescriptive with regard to what the property owner needed to do to preserve it. Where versus the emphasis now really is about this idea of being able to not just demolish an historic resource or demolition by neglect, which is the key focus, I think, of what we want to accomplish. It makes it easier to move this forward, in my opinion.
Absolutely, and one of my concerns is, like, sometimes when there are developers who come into our neighborhood and they might be using it for tax purposes or whatever, and they're letting it fall into neglect, that just, personally, that really upsets me.
I think that most of the board, or I speak for myself, I share that opinion. So. Okay, well, thank you. Okay, next on the agenda is agenda item number 11, discussion and possible authorization to advertise a proposed amendment to Chapter 78, Vehicles and Traffic of the West Goshen Township Code of Ordinances. That is.
This is something that Brian sends me probably annually as new roads come in and as the police traffic unit identifies certain things that need to be ordained within the ordinance so that they can properly enforce them. So there's some speed limits and some stop intersections that have to be added.
The speed limits are new requests. The turn restrictions are existing signage that is not the ordinance of the police department cannot enforce.
So the signage is there, I know at least on the Wawa what it is, so because we don't have that particular requirement in the ordinance, we can't enforce it.
Yes, so for example,
left turn.
as you come out of the borough, there's a no left turn sign that sits right here for no left turn into this, into here to go up to the further one. And it's actually back here, I went too far.
Yeah. Well, it's in my opinion, it's too late anyway. It sits right at the point at which
it's right here.
Yeah, so what should it be further?
That's where PennDOT placed it. That was based on the PennDOT permit. No left turn into the Popeyes, you need to go up to the further one because of.
Oh, it's pointing into the.
Yeah, so no left turn to turn into the Popeyes, you should come back because of cars are coming around here with no queuing. Yes, so that sign is not in our ordinance, the police can't enforce it, someone goes up in front of it.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
That sign's already there.
That intersection's actually been modified though, hasn't it? I mean,
This is, yeah, but this was placed into the intersection by PennDOT when this was created. So PennDOT had a sign placed, we have to put an ordinance to enforce it. That's their.
That entrance is designed not to allow you to be able to turn a left into it.
Correct.
That's the way it's designed.
When people start doing it, but they can't enforce it. Example, Airport Road has one as well, that's over by the airport that cannot be enforced.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's what those three signs are for.
And so we get the signs. What about the speed limit reduction on Andrew Drive and Saunders Lane? Why is that necessary?
There are currently no speed limit signs on those roads, so there is not speed limit. There's been complaints of speeding of people on Saunders Lane. That's where I was beginning. There's been complaints from people from this back flying out through Saunders up to the corner. The police have received complaints that since it's not signed, they can't enforce it. And since we're going to sign Saunders, Andrews does not have speed limit sign on it currently, that the wood out is not. There's no speed limit signs on that road there.
Andrews is all commercial property, right? But
Correct.
Saunders leads back to,
So
there's no residential at the bottom of there?
No, it doesn't get all the way through.
It's just all commercial?
Yes,
Okay.
both commercial, there's not currently speed limit signs on either of them.
And Brian, doesn't the local, for a local road, does it default to being a 25 mile per hour?
I don't know how that works with the area code. That would be a question for the police, but it was brought to me, Sergeant Gracer brought all these signs to me in the past year. So I put them in this, Chris and I work on this once a year for adoption, to update our ordinance.
Yeah, at the traffic committee, we talked about that, starting to address it, indicated that they can't enforce a speed limit that's less than 25 miles an hour.
Unless it's a school zone.
Unless it's a school district, right, and it has to be within like a block or something like that.
Yeah. The lowest that can be enforced by state statute is 25.
Right.
I don't know if it's signed if it can be enforced. That's why he asked for the speed limit signs.
So, I mean, just to push this point, if someone complains about speeding, are we defaulting to the 25 miles an hour? Why not 35? Or
Yeah, that's what I want to look into, because I'm not certain it can go over to 25. I feel like I know there's something in the PennDOT regulations which you have to follow, that it has to be like the 85th percentile speed.
But I don't know if it's a single access road, it has to be. I don't know if it has to be. It may already be in our, an ordinance of 25, it's just not signed.
What, these roads?
Yeah.
No, these aren't in your ordinance, I checked.
Okay.
Yeah, these definitely are not in your ordinance, but I do think before we go further, I want to double check, because you are bound to follow the PennDOT regulations, so I want to make sure that you're authorized. I should know this and I don't, so I want to double check on a local road.
Just doing a quick search, it looks like in non-residential areas it defaults to
35, yeah.
And residences, it's residential districts, it's 25.
25, yeah, so let's double check that.
so you want to table this for tonight then?
Yeah, because I want to make sure if did they specifically ask for it to go to 25, or did they just specifically ask for it to be signed to something?
The email I got from Sergeant Bracer asked it to be 25.
Okay, so let's double check to make sure that's authorized. So we'll bring it back to you at your second February meeting to give you whether it can be at 25.
Okay.
If the law allows you to be at 25, does the board want it to be at 25?
I don't think it needs to be 25, like 35 seems reasonable to me, but I don't know what the source of the complaints is, I don't know what Sergeant Grease is basing this on, so until I know that, it's hard for me to argue a position.
Okay.
Also,
Are we
just,
gonna approve the signs?
it has to be one package.
Yeah.
Just keep in mind now, if the speed limit set at 25 mile an hour, they will give out tickets at 35 mile an hour. There's a 10 mile an hour speed limit differential, and that's even by statute.
But the
So
board
if you
was,
set it at 25, they can go 35 and they won't get a ticket. Am I right about that?
You don't give tickets at 40 or 50.
But in a local street like this, maybe they would.
The point I'm making is you make it at 35 mile an hour, they go up to 45 mile an hour.
But you can't, I don't want you to do something that's unlawful.
Yeah,
would the board like me to have Sergeant Gracer here at the next meeting?
I think so, yeah.
You can-
I mean, if he's got justification, he's done analysis and all the rest of it, to Kristen's point, that's fine, he can just tell us that and present it, but if it's just an argument for 25 and not 35, we need to hear what he's basing it on and maybe direct him otherwise.
I'll ask him to meet you.
Thank you. We'll move on then to agenda item number 12, which is discussion and possible approval of a proposal from Roseanne McGrath Consulting to update West Goshen Township's compensation and classification system. Chris.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So before the board this evening is a proposal from Roseanne McGrath Consulting to update the township's compensation and classification system. The township undertook a similar study in 2015, which resulted in the current system that's in place. Currently, the positions within the township's non-uniform structure operate on 9 position categories with a 20 to 30-year range. It follows a range where there is an 85% minimum, 100% midpoint, 150% maximum per category. As it's been 10 years since a similar study has been completed, doing an update would be beneficial. Per the proposal, the analysis would provide an overall evaluation of the township's salary and benefits, as well as look at such items as performance management. The proposal outlines a minimum time to complete at 20 hours at a rate of $150 per hour, so that calculates out to a minimum cost of $3,000.
Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
Does the board have any questions about this proposal with Ms. McGrath? She was appointed as our HR consultant at the annual organization meeting in January for just such kind of a resource use.
And that is her hourly rate that was included with the materials for the organizational meeting.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Okay. Does someone want to make a motion to approve the proposal and scope for this work with Ms. McGrath?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Ashley. Is there a second? I will second it. Is there any questions from the board on the
We want to
motion?
put a cap on this or not to exceed on this?
I'm just gonna take what it takes. She said it was 10 hours.
20, minimum of 20 hours, because there were two parts that were a minimum of 10 hours apiece.
Oh.
I think we should tell her at this point, it's just my view, that we don't want to have more than 25 hours charged without coming back to the board and explaining where she is with the analysis.
Certainly.
Okay, thank you. Is there any public comments or questions? Charlie?
Does she say what the basis, what the data is that she's going to do this analysis to?
Well, she's very experienced herself. I mean, she's done these kind of consulting proposals. That's part of the reason we adopted her as our consultant. We've discussed various things that she's supported with, helped us with in the past. And this is one of the...
Is she using comparisons? Is she using a state or a national database?
She's going to use comparables to similar sized municipalities to West Goshen.
There's also the Chester County data that's available on all these kind of similar positions. They vary in descriptions from one township to another, but you can understand the comparable scope of work for each role.
Okay.
She's hired by a lot of municipalities to do the recruitment, like when managers retire. She's often brought in, I can think of like 10 municipalities that have used her recently to hire some of the key department heads and managers. So she's got a good feel for the area and knows what's expected of the roles. So I think she's a great resource.
Yeah. It is timely to do this update, and we have a 10 years now with the current system, and we are looking to try to overlay a little bit more comprehensive and consistent approach to understanding individual performance within the way people are looked at for compensation. So.
And we had a situation several years ago, we were actually losing folks from the township because we weren't competitive. So we had to go through a process there. Now this is just really a continuation of that. Yeah. We have to maintain our wages and benefits to be competitive with other municipalities and other like positions out there in the economy.
Any other questions? Okay, then we'll take a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you, Tina. Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes 5-0. Okay, next on the agenda is item number 13, which is approval of the Board of Supervisors meeting minutes from January the 6th, 2025. Chris had one correction.
Yes.
On page 4. Walker Tompkins is an alternate member of the pension committee for 2025.
I will correct that.
Does anyone else on the board have a correction?
Yeah, I have one.
What, John?
On page 2, second paragraph at the top. I want to add a sentence here. Mr. Walsh, is there any comments from the board on the proposed motion? And then add that Mr. Hubbard includes himself in the vote. No comments were further noted. That's all I have.
Thank you, John. Any other corrections? Okay, with those noted 2 corrections, I make a motion to approve the meeting minutes of the board for January the 6th.
Second.
Thank you, Nate. Any other comments or questions from the board on the motion? Any public comment on the motion? Very good, we'll take a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes 5-0. Final agenda item for tonight is number 14, approval of the bills to be paid for the general fund, the sewer revenue fund, the waste and recycling fund, and the capital reserve fund. I will make a motion to approve the bills to be paid. Is there a second? Second. Thank you. Is there any?
Second.
I should beat you, I'm afraid, Tina.
That's fine, I'm not in competition.
We hear you. Does the board have any questions about the bills to be paid? I had one on page is that? This prepaid fund 01, Chris, on the,
Check number.
yes, check number 101339. Read tax bill 2025 for parcel number. Do you have any idea what that is? If not, just always follow up.
I believe that is our real estate tax payment for the property, for the cell tower property that's carved out from our municipal complex.
And that's the only one we have this situation.
Correct, because it's subject to a lease. Okay. What we do have, just so the board is aware, we do have to pay taxes on the property on Powell Lane for this year because I filed the exemption, but it's only considered between May 1st and August 1st of each year.
Okay.
And that'll be about, I think it's $150, something like that. It's relative, it's minor.
Any other questions from the board?
Yeah, just a couple. On check number 101333, that was for the EDU code. What is that? What conference was that, do you know?
That's the EduCode Building Code Conference that the code officials go to every year.
Okay. And I'm just looking at the cost there for the flight and all that. There's like 2 different reimbursements for that, for the flights. And then there's another, actually there's 3 reimbursement checks. I'm just wondering how they add up. 656.66, is that for one person or?
I believe one was for the flight out there and one was for the flight back, but I'll double check that.
Yeah, it just didn't add up, the numbers. 656.66 times 4 is $2,600.26. But then if you add up the reimbursement checks, it comes to like 29.
You know what? It's how they're allocated. It's how they're allocated in the budget because they're all the same check number and you look at how it's broken down, it's how they're allocated in the budget.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're broken out by account category within the budget.
Just one reimbursement expense.
Correct. It's one reimbursement broken down by different line items in the budget based on allocation.
Okay. Then on check number 101331, there's like 22 line items for that one check. And what was that for? 101331, page. This is the 3rd page.
Well, those are all charges on the credit card, and then they're broken down by different categories.
Oh, that's
of
just a
line
credit
item.
card?
Yeah. And those are all associated with, it looks like those are all associated with the police department.
There's a sandwich tray for the sergeant's feeding, lunch items for the sergeant. You have any idea what that is for?
You have to speak with the chief.
Okay. And there's $450 for custom hats.
You would have to speak with the chief.
Good.
Any other questions on the bills? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any public comment on the bills? Okay, we'll take a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Is there any opposition?
Aye.
Hearing none, motion passes 5-0. I will make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Nate. All in favor of adjournment say aye. Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you. Thank you, Tina.
Thanks.
We're going to hang up on you now.
Yeah.